Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Wednesday at 6:15 a.m. It is patch day, and yeah, it's just another day. Patch-wise, let's see. So far, what we've seen is a Callista bug that's been there since day one, made worse by a fix to improve Callista's reliability. So the Callista fix was actually not flawed, but it did highlight a bug that's actually been there since day one. So there's that. Thankfully, that one's like hard to pull off. It's not something that you're gonna like meta force, but it's definitely not great. Now after that, not entirely sure all the stuff going on. Tactics.tool I know hadn't updated, and it's still early. Early reports seem to be that Gangplank's still strong, which blows my mind if true, to be honest with you, because like they nerfed him pretty hard. So that's fascinating if true. Would point to some larger issues if that's actually true. So I don't know. We'll see. The other thing I'll tell you is that I think I've been overexerting myself. Maybe a little too excited to get back to TFT. I sat down to work, after uploading my video yesterday. So I was basically working from like 7 a.m., finished a project, did playtest, started another project, did some meetings, and it's like next thing I knew, it was like 6:30 p.m. and I'd finished 2 more projects, but had also been working 11 hours. So, but like I said, the amount of stuff I've gotten done already is great. One thing that hopefully will be ready for next set, one thing that helps the next set, and one thing that's, so, I mean, I've been going a little ham, which again goes back to my conversation yesterday where I was like, maybe I'm just too fast at the things I need to do. I don't know. But here's what it is. Maybe I need to take my foot off the gas a little bit. I don't know. But overall, like I said, the things I did were cool. Like the thing I did yesterday morning was like chef's kiss. You guys are going to love that. So, yeah, just lots of little things. And I think today I'm going to dive a lot deeper into the next set and start helping with that some more. The play tests have been fun though. So, yeah. All right, cool. Let's answer some questions. All right, the first one's a spicy one. The title of the question was how to communicate disappointment with Riot business decisions. Now, the question was a little vague. They basically said there was something Riot was doing that they felt so strongly about that they were going to stop playing TFT. And they wouldn't quite say what it was. It was something about a sponsorship or something. I don't know. A couple of my Discord users were trying to figure out what it was. But the question was sort of like, at a high level, it's sort of like, hey, if Riot does something that you don't approve of, and we've seen this countless times, right? Whether it be something like the Hextech Chess or EWC or, there was that one, I forget the one from a while back, but it was like a lot of the LCS casters weren't happy about like a sponsorship. Like there are, this happens a lot. How do you deal with it? So here's what I've learned over the years. This is hard for people to hear, but it is the truth, is that corporations are not the Borg, okay? So when you're like Riot bad, right, that's not actually what you mean, right? What you actually mean is the subdivision of Riot that allowed this to happen is bad. Now, a lot of uninformed kids on the internet will then go, well, yeah, but someone had to approve that. No, not really. That's not how it works, right? Like Dylan, the CEO, is not sitting there at the top of the ladder being the final approval layer for everything we do, right? Dylan is not sitting there approving if I want to rework the item system, right? Like that's not a thing he does. That's not how this works, right? Like if I want to rework the item system as an example, I barely have to check with my boss. My boss is sort of like, okay, it makes sense, like lightly. Because generally people are entrusted to do the right thing, okay? And so, same with like removal of Hextech chests, right? Like there might have been 1 or 2 layers of approval, but again, like Dylan, the CEO, is not sitting there going, I need to approve everything that happens at the company. That is not how a real company works, and especially a company of 5,000 people, okay? The reason I bring this up is because, again, we're not the Borg, and this is true of any company, right? Like, but it's just easier for people to comprehend, right? People want a target, a thing to be mad at, and whether that be a corporation as like a holistic entity, or this is why people like me who are like visible can be a lightning rod for this, right? It's like if you're mad at TFT, be mad at Mort, right? And I've been the lightning rod for some of like cosmetic decisions and stuff, even if I have nothing to do with it. So, it's not the company as a whole is doing something bad. It's some division did something that you disagree with, right? Now you have a choice there. The first thing is that should you like put your disapproval? Yeah, of course, right? Like go ahead and be, loud and vocal and be like, I don't want Riot to do whatever, right? Like just an example, I'm not saying this is my stance, but if you're like, I don't want Riot to participate in EWC, that's fine. That's totally fine. You can vocalize that, right? You can tag the people that you think might know, and you can be loud and proud about that. But, whether intentional or not, you can, and this is your choice, right? Like, I'm not saying don't do this, right? But like, do you want to punish the TFT team because a completely separate division made a decision that, they had nothing to do with, and in this case, whatever this user is asking about, like I don't even know what it is. But he's like, well, I'm going to not play TFT because of it, but again, this is your choice, right? Like everyone says vote with your wallet or whatever. You do have that choice, but like realistically, will the company ever know? Not really, right? Like, let's say 1,000 people follow your lead and stop playing TFT because of whatever this thing is that you're upset about, right? Like, the way we'll interpret that is just sort of like, oh, did the set not land well? And keep in mind, I say 1,000 people, like we would even notice that much in the data, given our population size. But assuming we did notice, it's like, who would we be able to isolate that the cause was that? No, we really wouldn't, So as an example, this is a fake example. This isn't real numbers. But let's say set 15 launched and it was doing really, really well in Europe, but less well in Korea, right? How would we know the cause of that, right? Do we go, is it because we pissed off Korean players somehow? Or did we do too much marketing in Europe? Or is it that Europe really likes anime, right? Like you have to figure out what the cause is. And the TFT team might not forget that, It's hard to make a difference as one person. So I honestly think the best thing you can do, and here's, this all comes back to how do you express disapproval, right? I think, for example, if you jump in and you're like, Riot, evil company, bad, F them. Okay, you kind of look like a disgruntled kid and you'll probably get ignored, right? But what I've at least noticed at Riot is that generally most people, not all, but most, care deeply about our players. And we want our players, the good players, to be happy, right? You see this with like Drew Levin recently. You see this with stuff I do. And there's more behind the scenes. So For example, if you write a nice detailed thing that's like, yo man, I love TFT, but what the F you doing with this thing? It really disappoints me, you know. You come across as a genuine person, and that will usually get read. And if a lot of people agree with you, you'll get a lot of, yeah, +1s, you know, and that can spread, right? And I think, you know, the Hextech chest is a good example of this, right? Like, I think clearly some people genuinely felt like the removal of Hextech chests was not the right direction, and that got a lot of +1s, and that impacted change, right? Like, so again, to your original question of how do you express disapproval? I think you'd express disapproval in a legitimate, authentic, formal way, verbally, you know, whether that be like a Reddit post or a Twitter post or whatever, and find out how big an issue it really is. And it's possible it's something that only bothers you. It's possible it's something that bothers everybody, right? And it's up to you to decide how much that bothers you, right? Like, if we bring up the EWC thing, right? Like, some people, not a problem. Other people, it might be like, man, the fact that they've decided to do this really bothers me, right? And everyone's going to have their own personal line of where they think decisions are. Now, if you are a person who is open to changing your opinions, you can have a conversation about, like, you know, am I wrong for feeling, not wrong for feeling this way, but should I feel differently or anything like that? Or, you know, some people feel really strongly about their beliefs, right? Some could call that stubbornness. Some could call that, you know, holding a strong line. But if you're like, nope, this is the thing, and everyone's got to do what's right for them, you know? What I have found is I certainly don't agree with every decision Riot makes, right? Like, that would be a bold-faced lie if I'm like, oh yeah, everything Riot does is perfect. That's not true. But what I can tell you is that I make every decision I think is best in my corner. And if they make a decision that I don't agree with, sometimes I'll be like, you know, the person I can talk to is Medler. He's got a little more cross-company visibility. And I'll be like, hey, Medler, why do we do this? That seems silly. Just letting you know, I think that was a silly call, you know? And sometimes he's like, hey, I hear you. And other times he's like, yeah, you and 50 other people, you know? So that's kind of how it works. But the other thing I found, and this is just my own personal stance, a lot of you are going to disagree with this. This is fine, is that I find wasting energy worrying about things that you cannot affect is a great way to accomplish nothing. And so this is kind of my stance on politics. But basically, I try to spend all my energy on things I can affect, right? Decisions around my family or TFT, the game I work on. And if I can't affect it, let's say, for example, I didn't like the Hextech chess. I wasn't working on League. I can't change it. So I think it might be a bad decision, but like, whatever. And so I sit in the corner and, you know, maybe it makes me play League less or whatever. Here, I'll tell you one actually that has affected me. I'll give you a real example, okay? When League changed to 3 splits a year, they were giving out an honor skin for each split, okay? And in doing that, it meant you had to play a lot more League if you wanted all the honor skins. And since I, up until that point, had a collection of every League skin except one, Season 2 Victorious Janna, I was like, hey, if I want to keep my collection going, I'm going to have to play more League, but I don't have time. And I expressed that opinion to one of the rioters, and they correctly said, look, we can't make our decisions based around the 0.001% of people that have every skin. We have to do what's right for the game. This is what we're going to do. Okay. Didn't agree with it. So what ended up happening is I stopped worrying about my skin collection. And now I'm behind probably like 80 or 100 skins. And I stopped buying league skins, you know. It is what it is. Didn't make a big deal out of it, but it was a decision I wasn't, happy with. It is what it is. But, that's what I said. Everyone's got to do what's right for them, Now, at the end of the day, does that really change much for them? No. But, yeah, it is what it is. So, TLDR here, do what's right for you. But remember, Riot is not the Borg. And, you got to do what makes you feel good. If you feel so strongly that you're like, I can't play a Riot game because of this decision, I get it. Can't say I agree, but I get it. So do what's right for you. But that's how I approach it, and that's how I think about it. So, yeah. I can tell you, there's another company's game that I play, and they've clearly gotten greedy with their monetization. And so my line has been, well, I just don't monetize on it. I still play it occasionally, but I just won't buy a damn thing. And that's fine, Again, everyone does what's right for them. So, okay. If you brought back shadow items, how would you do it? What would their power level be? Things like that. So, interestingly enough, if you look at the framework, a shadow item is roughly, so hilariously enough, a shadow item was tuned to be roughly double the power of a normal item, so much like radiant items, but with a drawback, so a little less than radiant items, which would put it in like artifact levels. But the tricky part is a lot of those drawbacks could be ignored, right? Like if you played correctly, for example, like Radiant IE said every time you crit, take damage, but if you had healing, who cared, So the drawback wasn't actually that big. So power-wise, Radiant items were expected to be around a little more than an artifact, a little less than a Radiant item. That's what their current level is. So if someone said, gun to your head, Mort, you got to bring back shadow items, what I would probably do is try to aim them for that artifact space so they could exist in the gold augments, which would mean lowering their power slightly to be approximately 1.5 to 1.7 times value, still have that curse, and that way you could treat the gold augment a lot like Portable Forge, where it would be like, gain a cursed radiant item. Like that's probably what we'd call them or something like that. And so it's like similar values to radiant, but with the curse, a little less, and bring them back. And then the other thing I would do is we have this thing, right, where it's like anytime you're working in the item system, it's very easy to make a generic stat stick, right? Like if you want to make Radiant IE or Radiant or Shadow IE, it's like, okay, it has more AD, more attacks, more crit, and it crits harder. Ta-da, design's done. This is not hard and it's not risky. But it's the unique ones that actually become the hardest to get right. This is your, at the time, Shadow RFC, Shadow Blue buff. Now I would say Radiant Edge of Night, where it's like if the special effect isn't enhanced enough, like currently Radiant Edge of Night, then it becomes terrible. But because that special effect can be so sharp on certain champions, like say Shadow Blue buff or Shadow RFC, it can actually be wildly better than 2x. Looking at you, stretchy arms. So what I would actually probably do to keep it safe, again, this is gun to my head if I'm bringing back shadow items, is I would probably avoid all of the unique ones, which there aren't a lot of those left nowadays. We've mostly gotten rid of them, but for example, I just probably just wouldn't make a Shadow Edge of Night. Probably just wouldn't, Don't have to deal with it, don't have to worry about it. Yeah. Or like if blue buff was still the old blue buff, I probably just wouldn't make a shadow blue buff. Yeah. Maybe Morello red buff would be the other ones. Maybe. But like the stat sticks are easy, right? So that'd be how I would approach it. Now, again, do I think that would be exciting right now? No, I think that'd just be another layer of complexity, and people would be like, because one of the things I really don't like in our augment system is if somebody presents you with an augment and you have no idea how to quantify if you should pick it or not. And so in this example, let's say you were offered a golden augment and it said portable forge on the left and shadow item on the middle, right? How do you decide which of those two you should pick? That's weird, you know? There's no information in the game. It's like, why do I want a shadow item over an artifact? Other than you like researched and found out the data on one is better than the other. And so this is something I've been poking the team a lot lately on the augments they make, is you can't just be like, here, have free stuff. You need to be like, oh, because I'm in this situation, or because I'm planning on playing this comp, this decision is better for me. A good example of this is like, if you have a prismatic augment, and it's like, do I get a radiant item, or do I get living forge, right? Like in that example, it's like, well, the radiant item is better right now, because it's one radiant item, which is better than an artifact. But living forge, if I can get to 4-1, will be better because I'll have 2 artifacts. And if I can get to 6-1, has a higher cap. So based on my board strength right now, combined with what I think I'm going to play and how I'll do, I think I can make it to 6-1. So living forge is the right decision. Or no, I just want a high tempo. So I have such a strong start, I can tempo really well. So the radiant item is the right decision. Right? Like augments need to have context in the game state to make you a decision. And I feel like shadow items wouldn't. Shadow items would muddy the message. So that's probably why I wouldn't bring them back. Now, if you told me 2 or 3 shadow items came back as artifacts, okay, I could see that. But the entire system, nah, I don't think so. So there you go. All right. Man, there was a meaty one. I'll try to get to this meaty one. Let me see here. So the person asked a pretty long-winded question, but the general idea here was currently nobody really plays silver traits, right? Nobody really ends their game at 4 Wraith or 6 Soul Fighter. Like the middle points of traits have become stepping stones for just the verticals. And we've talked about this before. So the person suggested, well, what if it was 6 Soul Fighter is actually the strong part, and then 8 Soul Fighter is not actually that much stronger, but it's what you go to if you're trying to chase the prismatic. So I think a solution like that could theoretically work. But I think it just moves the line and doesn't really solve the core problem here. So in that exact example, okay, so now everyone plays 6 Soul Fighter. Nobody plays 4 Soul Fighter. And then 8 is now, we've made it even harder because it's like, well, don't go 8 unless you're definitely winning a lot, in which case 8 isn't worth it. And which is kind of a weird message to send. And here's the challenge. We've talked about this many times with vertical traits, and I'm still struggling with this, to be honest, is if, okay, I'll use Soul Fighter as the example. Right now, the 6-piece health, I think, is 450, and the 7-piece health, I think, is 650 or 700. Let's just say 700. I don't remember the exact tunings right now. Currently, the jump between 6 to 8 is so big that it is always correct to play 8, right? Like that's the current tuning. So clearly there has to be a number where it's not always correct to play 8, and instead you play 6, take out the Callista and the Neferi to play like Twisted Fate and Braum, right? Like That's always the decision that comes down to in the end of your comps. So where is that line? Okay, well, 700 health is clearly 8 Soul Fighter. What about 650 health? Probably still Soul Fighter. Okay, what about 550 health? Ooh, see, now it's like, okay, so to go from 450 health to 550 health, I have to play a Callista and an Afiri? Probably not, right? And now all of a sudden you're just like, nope, now it's never correct to play 8. The line is always razor thin because it really is a binary question of which is better, you know? And now some of you might correctly be going, well, that's not always true, right? You play 8 Soul Fighter, and then when you get the better units, you go down to 6, right? So it's like you had the Neferi and the Callista, you found the Gwen, so it's like, okay, 8 Soul Fighter, that's stronger. And then now I found the Twisted Fate and the Braum, it's like, okay, down to 6 and I'm stronger, right? Like that's kind of the like idealistic version. But in that world, like let's say we got the tuning perfect, and that's true now, right? Like you still play 8 Soul Fighter, but not at the end, you know, and your highest cap board pulls it out. Well, the problem is then a lot of players, especially in that like gold to emerald range, are like, I had 8 Soul Fighter, they had 6 Soul Fighter, they beat me. Trait is bad, right? The nuance of understanding that like, hey, those traits, they're not actually that important and you're supposed to ignore them, is a really hard message that a lot of people don't want to be true. And this is definitely one of the most subjective like things you could debate, but for most of our audience, what we found is that's true, right? Most people, it's why whenever you watch a Twitch streamer, the first thing you do is like they make fun of you for playing 3 Bruiser or, you know, not having your traits perfect, because traits are the easiest way for them to digest the power of a comp. And this is also why like prismatics being rarer right now has upset a lot of people, because it's like a prismatic trait is a clear indication that my comp is strong. There's a nice correlation to how strong is my trait. That's going to be how strong my comp is, right? Things like items are actually a lot harder for them to digest. I think it was Nico was telling me he was watching a challenger streamer who was complaining that his karma did no damage, even though he had 6 Sorks and his trait web was perfect. And it's like, well, because his karma had Ginsus and Shojin. You know? Because items are not like, items are like the layer below that are less intuitive. But traits, it's like, is this nice, clear, in your face. It's like, I have my traits maxed and my army's 2-starred. My player expectation is that I do well. And so that's been kind of the big struggle. And finding that exact line is hard, right? And again, in that Soul Fighter example, if 550 is that perfect line, but then it's unintuitive, so okay, how about 575? Well, now all of a sudden it's don't ever play, you know, the TF and the Braum again. So those lines are thin. So it is what it is. But yeah, that's why right now, would I change anything? Probably not. But I will say, one of the big things that feels like it's missing from the platinum or the prismatic traits we've done now is like, if you have 2 emblems and you can hit 10 Soul Fighter, it doesn't need to be game winning instantly or anything like that. But there's just something missing about the like hitting a new breakpoint and having that satisfying payout. You know, Battle Academia, I think, suffers from this the most. It's like, it's not that hard to play 7. And then you get an emblem, and it's like, well, I could hit 9, but it doesn't do anything. It does feel pretty bad. I don't know. The prismatic thing, such an interesting spot. We're like right on the line here. But who knows? I think we'll maybe get some insights on this and then make a decision. So, yeah. All right. That's it. I only got through 3 questions today. I think I talked a little long on that first one. Hopefully I didn't say anything too crazy or controversial. I was talking to Drew Levin yesterday because, you know, he's going through it now that he's out there in the player eye, and you know, the pitfalls and the dangers and things that can bite you on this. So it's a tough thing, and especially when you're this open, when you say 1,000 things, the odds that one of them are going to piss someone off are pretty high. So, you know, even with these walk the dogs, now thankfully, everyone who walks the dog everyone who watches these is usually pretty chill. So, but we'll see how long that lasts. So, okay, that's it. I'm gonna go have breakfast, maybe try to sneak in a game of TFT. Now that it's a new patch, I should check it out. Even if I'm not working on live, it's still good to be aware of how things are going. So, who knows, maybe I'll play a couple games and then do my morning meetings, and then after 2 o'clock I have the afternoon free, and that's when I can get a nice block of work done. But until then, maybe I just play some league games. Like I said, I've had my foot on the gas hard for a while, so maybe I'll take my foot off the gas and play a little TFT. All right, that's gonna do it for me. Hope you guys have a great day. Enjoy the patch. Let us know how it's going so that we can iterate, because the patch cycle does continue. The team's gonna work on it. There's another patch soon. I know I'm looking forward to the opening encounters. There's a lot of more chill opening encounters, which is good. So, all right, that's gonna do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.